before we start, we'll have 72 seconds silence to remember those who lost their lives in the dreadful tragedy. Please could you turn all your phone notifications and computer notifications off. So, thank you very much. Are there any apologies for absence? Any declarations of interest? And please, can I have your approval for the minutes of the previous meeting? Over that, we've seen them. Agreed. Thank you. I'll just sign it. Okay. Very much. Right, Lots Road, construction of a new open space. And I should say, actually, I'll start by saying that the appendix 1, I think everyone's read it, has been discussed in the past. Are there any other questions that you'd like to ask? Anything that's not here? Because if that's the case, we need to go into part B, but if not, I'll take it that you've read it all, that you understand it, you have no further questions before we make any decisions. Is that agree? Ready to go to part B?
No.
Agree. Okay. Thank you. Okay, Emma, over to you.
Thank you. Well, I will try and be brief, Chair, because I think it's very straightforward. So I am incredibly, I think you all know, I'm very excited about this. I've been so lucky in my time to be involved with some very exciting construction projects, but I have never been in a position of opening a new park in the borough. I think this is certainly a first for me, probably first in a long time in London, most densely populated borough, and actually the Lots Road area is the most densely populated part of the borough. So I know this will be incredibly welcome, and it's in fact in our council plan. So it's unique in that sense, but also unique in that this will be what we're calling a meanwhile open space. And that is because it's a Thames Tideway site and they need to have some access. So everything will be in theory demountable at a 24 hours notice. But nonetheless, we are going to make this a beautiful and wonderful space for residents to enjoy. I think the paper's pretty clear. Currently, this is the first part, it's the first procurement part, with an estimated contract cost of 1.25 million. I think, as I say, all the information is there, and I know officers want to convoke and answer questions, and want to thank them for all the work they've done bringing it this far.
I'm knowing Lots Road. I mean, they've had a terrible time in the last few years because there's been so much construction.
Yeah.
But actually, to be able to provide park by the river, that's demountable. So that's kind of quite fun. They'll have wonderful designs. It's very exciting. So thank you very much for all the hard work that you've done. Are there any questions? Lots of hands popping up. Josh and then Kim.
Thank you, Monica and Bo. I just have a question regarding the estimated contract value, which Emma has already said is about 1.25 million, as is in the paper. Just considering the challenges we are as a council, which we'll discuss in separate papers regarding our financial position, especially the funding cuts coming from central government. How are we ensuring that we're going to stay on top of the data and there's many council projects that often overspend. That doesn't be the case in this example.
And with, I mean, the first thing to say is, I think Olivia said there's a lot of development in the area. So this is being funded from the seal contributions, which are kind of
Thank you.
a bit which are there to kind of offset the impact of development. So it's really important that those residents get something back for work going there and additional pressure on the area. So it's a procurement strategy. So we did a really detailed design. Well, I could tell you more about the design process, but I'm really pleased that we actually out to the public. So 3 designs put by residents, we have really good engagement, and they came back with the one that they felt was the best for the local area. So it's co-designed. We're going out to procurement. We've had good government advice. This is to build the site, and they'll come back with a tender that kind of outlines the cost of that. There is a PC built in. How do we make sure that
So prior to going out to tender for the design, we did our own sort of what I would call a shadow bid. So we did a rough design. We anticipated there being bespoke elements, some unknowns, and we built the costing based on that. We have tendered for initially with the designer. We asked them to produce a design for under what the budget that we actually have, anticipating that again there's always unknowns and there's always overspill, and we have factored contingency into the overall budget. So I'd like to think that we can stay on top of that. I don't anticipate any overspend. I think we've been quite diligent in how we get planned. There was a lot of planning that went into the project, knowing the site restrictions and knowing that we were having to go to bespoke elements. So I know the cost sounds high, but it's a very sort of unique setup that we're dealing with because it's a no-dig site, and I think we've managed to cover that, I think, with the shadow.
That's helpful, thank you.
Yeah, no, I think it's brilliant. I mean, and also in the south, we haven't got an awful lot of open space.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, really welcome. So I suppose, and also I think what I like about this is that there is potential for it to also link the walkway as well, which I think the opportunity going for Embankment through to Hammersmith would be brilliant. So 2 questions. First of all, could you give me an idea of the opening hours of what you're likely to do? Is it sort of floodlit stuff, which like this looks, and also practically, how do you manage this meanwhile? I mean, do we get sort of 20 minutes notice the bloke has to come out, wheel them around? No, and just give an idea of how it works.
We hope not.
So in terms of the day-to-day operations, we will follow the normal park opening hours, which is 7 a.m. until dusk. That is the plan. We also, as noted in the strategy, have put in a growth bid so we can have full-time staffing based at Cremorne Gardens, covering Cremorne Gardens and the new open space, to make sure that we maintain the standard, but also give visibility on the site. We're aware it's tucked behind the Thames pumping station, so we want that connection between the sites and we want that managed in the same way as other parks. We're not planning to have floodlights. There will be some lighting included in the design to get people out of the site safely, but the plan is to close it at dusk. And for
But the meanwhile, Max.
I'm sorry, yes. We have had a lot of conversations with both Thames Tidely and Thames Water about the maintenance requirements for the site. We aren't anticipating having to close regularly. There may be emergency situations where they have to come in and do urgent maintenance. They've told us that's within a 2-hour notice window. They're not expecting that to happen ever. But obviously in the event that it does, they will give us notice. Every other time that they have to close it, we will get sufficient notice. We will have to be able to move the equipment. But we are getting some assurance with them, and there is a land agreement being drawn up with Thames Water at the moment for the operation on sort of their access to the site.
a very different, unique park and one that's fully demandable and has to move?
Yes,
So
extraordinary.
actually the constraints, we had 3 design companies come down, and the constraints have meant that they've got some really creative ideas.
Yes.
So we've seen it as a positive. We think it's a
Yeah.
really great. Yeah.
The feedback from residents, we did a 2-stage sort of design process. So we had the initial design selection where we put anonymised designs out for community vote, which implements the tender and the overall sort of the most popular design actually on the tender. And then we did sessions on site where we've met with residents, with the designers on site, so they've been able to talk through their concerns, their sort of aspirations for the site, what they want, and that is now being worked up in the final design alongside the Thames Water and Thames Tideway restrictions, in consultation with the GLA, with neighbouring properties about access. So we're coming up with a really, really good design that residents are really pleased about, because there is a real lack of informal sports in the area. You know, the geography of Westwood Park means you can't really play football there. More Gardens isn't really suitable, so now we're going to have small scale football, we will have pickleball, we will have obviously pétanque, we will have basketball practice. We're passing there's a running track in part of the design, and we also have quiet space, a lot more greening, habitat panels, play. We're fitting a lot into a really limited site, and it is all movable. So I'm really excited about this.
And it'll be done by next summer.
We are aiming to start on site by start of February next year.
Yeah.
So we have to go. So next stage is planning submissions, so working on designs, guidance, planning, then running the tender for the construction. And we've had pre-app advice. We think we're on a good footing with that. We know what we need to do and what conditions might be imposed. So we're closing all of that down, aiming to get planning permission, start on site February and be open by early summer next year.
That is fantastic. And actually, as Bo was saying, it is payback for residents who have endured years and years and years of disruption. And that's what some money's for, is to, pay back. But any other questions? Otherwise, I will ask Mary, who I've
Well, yeah, just to echo what you said, that it's in such a great, it's a great project, but it's such a great use of sil. It really does, do what it's supposed to do.
Great. If there are no other questions, Samuel, hi.
Hi.
Chelsea, pass it yourself.
Yeah,
the
we
comment.
provide services there, so
I
I think,
think that's true. You know it very well.
yeah, thank you. So it's a huge contract, so obviously, would you seek social value to the tune of at least 6% of the total value of the contract? And if there's any possibility for this social value to translate into monetary value rather than fancy things that don't really benefit people. So is there scope for, because I'm thinking of the estates around, and for them to directly benefit from that, given the pressures we have on the HRA, whether there's any negotiation room for the 6% to be actually put into those estates?
I think they're really good questions. We have a legal obligation to price the social value, and absolutely right, it can really benefit the local community. The bidders will come back with slightly different kind of offers around that. I'd like to take that away and come back to you with what the options are, but we'll reach out to you and we'll come up to a that's okay. We can see what your ideas are and feed them back through the process. Is that okay? Thank you.
That'd be very helpful. Thank you, Samuel, for your input.
So can I just jump in here, because Sammy, I think it's raised a very good point. We were discussing this the other day about making sure social value remains local. And I've been doing a bit of work on the World's End Estate about how to connect not just the King's Road with the river, but to encourage residents to use this lovely new beautiful park, and so maybe that's something we could work with, the social value aspect, just kind of making the wayfinding better and kind of having the estate more appealing.
I think Councillor Bay will definitely come back to you with ideas.
Great. Are there any other questions or comments? No, not anyone. So please, can we agree the recommendations on her?
Agree.
Thank you. Next page 12 is 41 financial model, please.
Yep. So we've got two papers now. I know slightly a game of two halves. This first one paints a somewhat positive picture. We've obviously balanced our budget with a nil variance, which I think is incredibly commendable to the officers and to the borough at large, given the pressures we know exist around the local government funding. Obviously, within the paper, it's clear that some departments have been able to outperform, some have had some overspends. I'm sure colleagues will reference them. But really, the main takeaway I want people to see on this paper is that our net outturn budget is 217 million. And to keep that number in mind when we talk about the next paper and the challenges that the central government are giving us, you can see some of the costs that we're having to deal with is that inflation has remained very high over the last period. So that's factored into some of our contracts. The flip side of that meant that, of course, we've had slightly more interest on our investments. But the paper itself is quite clear. The council at this point in time has done very well, coming at a nil variance. But the difficulty lies in the next paper, and some of the challenges that we're colleagues might highlight tonight will certainly come up again later on.
Questions? It's on this one.
I was just going to make a comment because I know we've had an email from the Curve Legacy Group, and Samia and Samira are here. And I just want to acknowledge the work that they've done and their commitment to this project. And I know that you've recently met with officers, and I think you're going to be meeting with officers next week or the week after. So the work is ongoing. Just to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Catherine?
Again, it's more of a sort of statement than a question, which was just to acknowledge the overspend in family and children's services. First of all, I wanted to reassure you that all the savings that we've said we'll do, we are on track to deliver all the savings. But the overspend, which is outlined on page 62.16.3, is the ongoing issue we have with very high cost placements. So we have 14 looked after children. That's only 14% of our looked after children who are have an overall placement cost of in excess of £200,000 each. So if you imagine the cost of that, it's absolutely massive, and I'm afraid it blows our budget. But obviously, this is something that we're really addressing to look at how we can transform our services in FCS, because we recognise we just cannot continue to be spending that much on placements every year. It's just unsustainable, particularly with the funding cuts that are coming down the line. So we acknowledge that, and we are looking at how we can address it.
Thank you. Julie?
Yeah, so I wanted to thank Office of Environment and Neighbourhoods because we performed pretty well in that department over this quarter. There is no achievement of income from parking services, and although it's never our intention to levy parking fees to raise income, it obviously does have a financial impact. I guess I would just note that the use of that is obviously ring-fenced, so it doesn't get us out of all our financial difficulties, but it obviously contributes. And then in this area, I guess, just to say, obviously, there are some areas where we've delivered a lot. So, for example, we've planted more than the 400 trees we said we would in our council plan and in our manifesto. But downstream of that, there is a cost in terms of maintenance. So some of the smaller overspends in environment and neighbourhoods come out of that. So there are pressures too. And then also, so there are some good things happening. So, for example, Gloucester Road North and Stratford Road in the outturn, there's money to give feasibility to look at how we can roll out the next phase of amazing spaces. So good performance in environment and neighbourhoods. There are some pressures, but there's also green shoots and things that could be quite exciting in the future.
Good. Thank you very much. So,
Yes. So housing is, and thank you, Dan, for saying not underperforming, but the spend is over, because actually the housing department, I think, actually has been performing very well. We've actually got our temporary accommodation numbers down to below 2,000 for the first time in a very, very long time. So I would really like to commend officers for doing that. I think that is excellent. But of course, financially, as you can see, the costs have increased. So whilst we've got the households down, the cost of accommodation has risen. And sadly, the government has not yet increased its grants to any councils for its housing. So this is something that all councils are coming together to lobby the government on. So, because otherwise it just falls to the councils to meet the gaps and pick up pieces, which is not good for anybody. But again, the HRA budget is in here as well, and it's doing well. And just today I was looking at some of our new building, and so whilst they come out of different budgets, they're absolutely linked, because every time we can build a new home, we can help someone in the temporary accommodation list be housed. And so that will not only be a great outcome for the residents, but will also reduce the cost when we're looking at it from a financial point of view. So we are doing everything we possibly can to address this issue. But there are a lot of things that are right about. And I don't know if officers want to add anything to do that, and how you lobby in different financial groups about this. We pick up the lobbying in the next paper, actually, because it's our future funding. Okay.
Yeah, I just, this is for both papers really. I mean, how incredibly sort of depressing that the whole outlook is, and I feel like as fast as we run, we will not be able to run. You know, the sands are shifting under us so fast. Getting this transformation work done. I mean, as it is, if we didn't have parking revenue, we'd already be heavily underwater. as so many other councils are.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that strikes me, which is a sort of national issues, as long as we have government and governments who hand down responsibilities to us for children, for adults, temporary accommodation, with no thought about how we're actually going to pay for them.
Yeah.
You know, nothing is going to improve. You know, you have the legislative over here and the actual delivery completely detached.
Yeah.
And the system is broken. The model is completely broken nationally. And I'm just, you know, you can't keep doing that, putting more burdens on us to deliver things for people without thinking about how can you pay for it. So it's not just us, I know. I mean, it's SEN, it's temporary accommodation, it's the whole thing. It's just but I commend officers for trying to, feels like it was only trying to hold back the flood. Yeah, it's good news, isn't it?
Yes, but I think I'd like to put officers, you know, as it says in 1.13, strong financial management and controls over recent years have meant that, you know, we're in a good position
Compared to others.
To deal with this. And also, I would also like to draw your attention to 1.1 and 1.11, saying, you know, we are really doing detailed modelling of the potential impact of the defunding of Central London, otherwise known as fairer funding. And to say in the future, a lot of things just simply are not going to be affordable. And we need to take strategic decisions to see what we do with what we've got. We'll have to cut our coat according to its cloth. And part of that won't be just salami slicing. It does have to be fundamental transformation of how the council operates at every level, because otherwise we simply won't manage. And we do have a duty, have a balanced budget every year. Unlike the government, we have to according to our code. So, Mary, any comments from you?
We haven't seen this yet. We're seeing it at our next meeting. I know what I'll be commenting on, and that's the variances within the balanced budget and the dangers that they represent. But I'll leave that for Ursula.
Okay, thank you. Samira, do you hear anything? And before you say anything, actually, I should like to just commend you for your performance of Bromley House on I don't know, was it video or social media.
I said it 8 years ago, want to be the best.
It was a joint effort.
We got there in the end.
We did, and we've got plans to try and raise income, put some in the HR, of course. But yeah,
From the community room.
yeah,
Great idea.
absolutely.
Thank you to you and the residents of Bromley House.
Can I ask my question?
Yes,
now?
ma'am.
It's just in reference to page 83, 23.7. And you've known me for a long time, so when you don't get things right, I'll tell you. I'll keep on telling you, but when you do right, I'll tell you that I wanted it on record. The leadership decision that you made a few years ago about the legacy fund was a great decision. I don't know many councils who would give power to local communities to manage money, let alone 1.3 million. So I just wanted to put this on record. And for us, we put all our time and commitment into that because that was a good sign coming from you.
Yeah.
And that's not work that can happen rapidly. And reading 23.7, it just felt a bit bitter. It is a huge piece of work. It's a legacy piece of work. And potentially, this is going to create sustainability. And it's not just about 1.3 million. That could resolve some of the issues you have, some of the issues with HRA. It's just a bit up in the air. We've come here today just for you to commit again or to give us assurances that this grant for legacy work is a top priority. The tower is coming down. A lot of groups have tried to do grandiose things in the last 8 years. There's nothing to show for. Millions have been spent. That's one piece of legacy that I think can stay for generations to come. So I'm asking you as a leadership team to renew that commitment that this legacy work is a top priority for the council.
Thank you.
Sarah, well, I think I mentioned earlier that you are meeting the team. I know you met last week, you're meeting again next week. So I have to wait and see what the feedback is from those meetings, because I'm not going to be there, unfortunately.
But we also, in my email, like I think it's not just.
But this is revenue recovery money, so it's there, it's ring fenced, it's not. Yeah.
Yes, so I think we can certainly assure you that in the budget and things, that money has been ring fenced, hasn't it? So, but I think I don't want to jump in the middle of negotiations that you're having with officers and conversations last week and next week. But I think we hear what you say, and thank you. We really appreciate you taking the time and trouble coming this evening to make that point. It's well made. Thank you. Are there any other questions or anything on this paper? Otherwise, can we accept the recommendations in paragraph 2? Read. And now another finance. Not doom and gloom. That's more doom and gloom.
Sadly, this. Yes, I did say a game of two halves, and we had the substitution. But this is really the opposite of a rosy picture. The previous paper obviously showed what good management and good financial competency can yield. And sadly, government have made a decision to throw that out of the window. And when I mentioned earlier to pay attention to the 270 million, it's in reference to the 83 million pounds that they are cutting from our net budget. So that's 40%, just under 40% of our budget that they expect us to remove from this borough and from our residents over the next 4 years. I'm just doing some maths myself now, and that's about £500 for every man, woman and child in the borough every year that they need to find to balance that. It is an absolutely enormous figure. It means, as Elizabeth says, that we will have to adapt the way that this council functions and the services and the way we offer those services to our residents. We want to continue to be the best, and our fantastic reports recently from adults and from children show that we can deliver those services. It's really disappointing that government have taken the view that London needs to be punished. London, as we know, is the financial engine room of this nation. And the damage that they'll be doing to other boroughs, not just Kensington and Chelsea, is frankly reprehensible. This is not just making budget savings, it's the pace at which they're asking us to make them means that we don't have the time to bring in phased, managed, cautious and clearly delivered projects. We have to do things at a real pace, and pace is something that does concern me because it is our resident services that we're talking about, and it's the way in which this council is going to adapt and the way the council delivers is going to change. We have to take our residents along. I think residents really do have to understand that it's not going to be the same as it has been in the years gone by, and it's really not of our doing. This is something that's being done to us, somewhat spitefully, I would say. It's simply not fair. They call it fair funding, but it's anything but. So I don't have anything much to say to that one.
Kevin.
Right, well, I saved my thunder. I mean, I agree with what Emma said in the last paper. When I think the most interesting part of this paper is the response that we've given in Appendix 1, which I think covers all the arguments. The one that really frightens me is that when the government talks about plans to simplify, I mean, that's Orwellian speak, where this is how we're going to cut your money, but it's the council tax one that I was really most struck by, is where the statement is that our funding will be on our assessed need to increase council tax. And there's an example given here of Band D, which are people with not lots of money in our borough, where the average is 2,000. And the suggestion is that obviously what we would do is have the ability to increase that our current Band D from £1,100 to £2,000. I mean, that's twice. This is stuff which is not covered on universal credit. And so the impact of this, for us is a stark choice about whether or not we're putting council tax, which I know there's a restriction on that in terms of having to have a referendum or cutting services. It's just truly frightening. But I suppose if I should put a question in rather than just rant about this paper, is that practically, though, I believe that there's a cap on what you could put your council tax on by 5%, unless you have a referendum. I just wondered if there's ever been any referendum in history that would vote in favour of a capital tax increase of £1,000, £100%.
So you're absolutely correct, councillor, there is a cap, 5% before you have a referendum, and I'm not aware of any council that has had a successful referendum to date.
Anyway, sorry, rant over.
No, I think everyone's feeling similarly. Johnny?
Yeah, so I guess the first question I had was whether we know any more about kind of when we'll know the outcome of their funding review. Obviously, it's a big concern. And then the second one was just savings definitely have to come first, because that's the financial context we're going to be in with what's coming down the track. But I wondered if fees and charges are kind of part of the mix, that they're not covered in too much detail here, but and obviously it's residents in many cases who pay those fees, and there are some ring fences on individual levies that we charge. But it is another income lever, so I would have thought it probably does need to be part of what we're looking at. Are we doing any modelling? What can we expect to see over the coming months?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So we were promised outcomes from the fair funding review earlier than the previous year financial settlement. So usually we get the draft settlement the week before Christmas, and we were promised that. But with the changes that have recently taken place in government, that's now not going to be the case. We now know that the budget is taking place on the 26th of November. It'll then take a few weeks for MHCLG to work through the numbers from that budget, and that's so we're not expecting to get the draft settlement any earlier than we normally do. I think the week is something like the 15th of December. We're expecting it, so just before Christmas, as always. So no additional time to work that through. And then with regard to fees and charges, so yes, we are doing some work, and we've done it with yourself as the previous portfolio holder in the past. So we will launch fees and charges consultation as part of the November leadership team report that launches all of the savings and pressures there. So we're doing some modelling at the moment around which fees and charges could we increase, which ones if we increase might they actually reduce demand. It is quite a fine balancing act. But we are looking at that at the moment, and we'll definitely be bringing that back. I think that comes to the November report, and then it will launch for consultation along with all the other elements of the budget straight after that leadership meeting. That's really interesting.
Okay.
Thank you. And like my colleagues here, I mean, I look at this in total despair, particularly in relation to family and children services. I mean, I won't read out the whole report, but if you turn to page 156 and you see the sort of extraordinary formula that seems to have been applied to family and children services, which is, I mean, doesn't make any sense to anyone. As we know, in this borough, 1 in 4 of our children are deemed to be 4 households are meant to be living in poverty. And yet this formula doesn't take into account the income deprivation affecting children in index and eligibility for free school meals. So some of the poorest children, this whole formula is affecting the poorest children in this borough. And this is a government who keeps saying fairness, fairness. This formula is totally unfair for our children. So it doesn't have housing costs taken into factor. It now has some peculiar metric in which children's health measures are based on parents' subjective measures. So the parents come up with the health measures, not a sort of metric related to their SEND or EHCP plans. And of course, we haven't had the government's new SEND strategy yet, so we have no idea whether they'll be able to support our vulnerable children with particular difficulties in an extra special way. But one of almost the most peculiar metrics of all is the metrics which concerns the characteristics of parents, in which they have to admit their educational attainment. So is this suggesting that if you've done well, therefore you get less money? I mean, I do not understand any of this. So obviously we've put in a robust response. We've asked some very robust questions to MHCLG, and I just really hope that they will come up with some comprehensive answers to this, because of all boroughs, I think our Family and Children's Services Department are going to be hit the most in a borough that has the most deprived children. It's very, very shocking and upsetting.
Thank you, Catherine. Josh?
Yes, and I'd just like to say, I will pose this as a question eventually, but especially the impact on health services. So I don't think there's been really any democratic consent from the electorate regarding these cuts, for two reasons. One, that as everyone may know, the government is undergoing a huge reconstruction of the NHS and health services. So much so that there's been a significant cut. There's been a 40% cut already to our local NHS services that the council doesn't provide. They are merging our relevant ICBs again for the process to further cut those. Last week we got notification that the police are cutting all their mental health police officers from the streets, which then puts pressure back on us to try and pick up these particular concerns, which then the money we don't have. And then secondly, and thirdly, lastly, the Chancellor announced that she will not raise any more taxes for the remainder of this Parliament. And then now we get news today that potentially there's a £30 billion black hole to cover the £40 billion black hole that was last year as well. So my real concern is that we're being taxed to resolve an issue. And as everyone knows, you can't tax your way out of a concern. So overall, I just wanted to know about Lisa and Liam, how have our Cares campaign going against the government to try and kind of raise all these particular concerns? It's not just merely cutting our budget by £83 million. It's all the other elements that are giving pressure. It's the NHS pressure, it's the policing pressure, it's the taxation pressure above and beyond council tax that is all having an impact.
Thank you for the question. So we are doing a lot of campaigning. There was a question came from over this side a little bit earlier about lobbying. So we did, before we responded to the Fair Funding Review, we did a lot of work with London councils, because I'm sure you'll appreciate there are some London councils who are actually going to benefit from this. Yeah. So that is quite difficult. But London councils are working on behalf of everybody, and the Society of London Treasurers are working really closely with them as well. So we are, from that side of things, continuing to lobby. We've met with MHCLG. We continue to have conversations with them, and will continue to have conversations with them. As you see, we've got a robust response into the Fair Funding Review. And then we've got our comms team as well, who are all joining up with some of the London boroughs, and we're also working with Central London Forward on all of this as well. And I know that our leader is part of some of the London Council's finance groups as well. So we're lobbying everywhere we can. And if Mike were here, I think he would say, you know, the problem we've got is the size of the pie. It's the same size. It's how they set it. So if they give some more to us, someone else will get less. The pie isn't going to grow. So it's a very difficult situation. But that doesn't matter. We will still continue to lobby as much as we can for fair funding.
Yeah, I think we've lobbied really, really hard. And also, I think we're very lucky with the quality of our officers, that you've asked all the right questions and pointed out all the great failings in the formula, the fact that it doesn't take into housing costs into consideration, and that if you look at London as a region and you include housing costs, we're probably the most deprived region. If you don't include housing costs, we come about seventh. So if you want to take away money from London, that's how you fix it. That's what's happening.
Yes, I mean, the segue. You said, I mean, I was just going to say housing. We talked about housing in the last paper, you know, being one of the root causes of many councils going under and having to apply for extra council tax raising powers. Housing again. Fair funding formula, which doesn't take in housing costs, is absolutely extraordinary. And I think your response to the consultation is absolutely spot on. Elizabeth just said to not take that into account. I just is unbelievable. I mean, any deprivation measures used in funding formula must calculate income after housing. Yeah. We live in London, and in our borough, it's a wonderful place to live, but we do have two of the most deprived wards in London, if not in the country. And so thank you for your efforts on lobbying, and let's hope we may this.
Any other comments? Otherwise, Mary, I think we all talk about the OSC.
Gloomy contemplations, no, nothing to urge.
And Sammy, I
It's
just,
just
yeah,
that it's very depressing, and I think what you're saying, because doing casework, like even the way they calculated the benefit cap, they don't take into account housing costs, but the reality feels like people who are at work, they lose out because, you know, they can't afford their rent. What can we do? Because obviously we're not very impressed with the government either. We're entering a phase, especially around in our ward and around Nottingdale, where we know children and young people are not getting the mental health support they require during the construction of the tower. So what can we do to lobby this government? Because it is their responsibility. They've caused by deciding to take down the tower. It's a government project. It's having an impact on people's mental health, on education, and on the population. So they should.
When you say what can we do, I think we just
Well,
continue.
We are happy to lobby as well, because
Please do.
we're going to see the impact. And it's not for the local authority to put the extra services that are needed because the government is doing what they're doing without having done an impact assessment. So they need to pay for that, because the needs are doubled locally, and there's no money for it.
Well, every time we've met, Maxine and I, the previous Secretary of State, Angela Rayner, and we met on a regular basis, almost monthly actually to start with, Alex Norris. We brought this up time and time and time again, exactly what you're saying about services that the NHS are meant to be providing in the area. I've written to the new minister, Samantha Dixon, but we haven't had a meeting. But thank you very much. It'll be on the agenda for our first meeting. Because you're absolutely right.
We'll have it on. We've got a ministerial leadership meeting, and Samantha Dixon is going to be the new Alex Norris. So we'll make sure to put this on the agenda as well.
Well, then we're both singing from the same hymn sheet, because we're both representing residents. And it's really important we make government aware, especially as we've got new ministers who may not be aware.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the local MP who also sits in the housing committee, which is, absolutely essential to kind of.
What does our local MP say about this?
Haven't had a huge amount about it.
Yeah, I mean, residents should write to him as well.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. Okay, so please can we agree the recommendations of paragraph 2? And are they agreed?
Agreed.
And I don't believe there's any other business, so it's just hopefully say have a good evening and thanks for the meeting. And that is now closed.
Thank you.
One of the things that